Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Heal with Grace podcast. Y'all, our episode today is going to be very, very helpful to you if you've ever experienced any kind of gut issues, digestive issues, IBS, anything along those lines that I know, honestly, most of you do, probably. It's just not talked about enough in this world. And so I'm really excited to have this guest on here. Claire is a therapist that I've connected with here in the Colorado area. And she just speaks volume to her own personal journey and her professional journey in this. So, yeah, her name is Claire Bailey. She is a somatic psychotherapist and coach dedicated to helping clients heal from chronic pain, trauma, and disconnection from their authentic selves. Her core training is in trauma informed somatic body psychotherapy, inviting awareness through felt sensation, breath, and expressive movement. Her integrative practice weaves together relational, psychodynamic, and social equity perspectives with an emphasis on serving the LGBTQ plus community and fostering self-compassion. She is a recovered chronic pain patient herself and utilizes pain reprocessing therapy, integrative somatic parts work, similar to IFS, focusing gestalt and range of other evidence-based modalities to foster deep, lasting change. Without further ado, settle in and get cozy and listen to the episode. Hi, Claire. Thank you so much for coming on the Heal with Grace podcast. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Hi, Grace. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and just jump in and share with us a little bit about who you are and how you came to this mind body work.
Sure. So, my name is Claire Bailey, and I'm a somatic psychotherapist and coach. I'm based in Colorado, and my professional focus and dedication to really addressing chronic pain and other physical symptoms and trauma is really deeply informed by my own experience of navigating neuroplastic symptoms. And I've been in the neuroplastic space for about 8 years now. So, first as a client or patient, and now as a clinician. And before that, I spent about 10 years suffering with neuroplastic symptoms. And for me, those really manifested in the form of debilitating gut issues. I also experienced recurrent tension headaches and some fibromyalgia-type body pain as well at certain points in my journey, but it was really the digestive, the gut symptoms, and the chronic abdominal pain that were the most predominant symptoms for me. And before I kind of go further into all of that, I really want to be clear about why I want to share my story. And it's because my graduate research really showed the transformative role that recovery stories can have in fostering healing when it comes to people who are recovering and trying to recover from these neuroplastic symptoms. And there can be a real paradigm shift that's required both as a client and also as a provider to understand the brain's role in creating real physical symptoms in the body. And so, along with the neurophysiologic education, these recovery stories are just such a powerful mechanism for giving patients hope and helping them really build the confidence to know that they can achieve these neuroplastic changes that are habitually or around habitually reinforced physiologic responses to stress, and that they can transition out of these old neural pathways. So I'm really excited to share my story with you and your listeners today because who are I want people out there who are suffering to know that healing is possible and that they can get better.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And that's a huge reason why I'm having more and more people come on the podcast to share their story
Mm.
to foster hope and help people understand not only just that healing in this way is possible, but also different types of symptoms, right? I haven't had someone come on and talk about the debilitating state that your gut issues can have, right? And like gut pain and all the things that come with it. So I think this is a
Yeah.
really important piece of it, specifically your symptoms too. So thanks
Yeah,
for sharing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just going to name that, gut symptoms are a very prevalent form of
Yeah.
neuroplastic symptoms. Our guts are very sensitive, right, to the environment, to stress. And so just wanting to name that too.
Yeah, exactly. So can you describe to us before you came to this work, what did that journey look like for you? Were you diagnosed with anything? Like, what kind of treatments did you try? Like, what kind of roads did you go down so we can get an idea?
Yeah. So, for me, my symptoms came on uh, rather gradually. Like for some people, like, there can be more of an acute onset, but for me, there were kind of whispers of symptoms throughout my teens and into my early 20s. It was probably around age 20 or 21 when my quality of life really started to be impacted in a big way. And well, every person experiencing um, neuroplastic symptoms has a different journey and has a unique constellation of factors that really influence these symptoms to develop. My experience around their development really shares certain similarities with many of the people that I work with. And one example is that there can be often like a pressure that we put on ourselves or an intensity that we approach life with. And so that was really the case for me and led to just this combination of external stress, internal stress that ultimately manifested in my relationship to food and then consequently affected the function of my enteric nervous system. So that's involved in GI function. It's involved in the processing of our visceral sensations. And so my journey really highlights this professional realization that it's often when our nervous systems are overloaded with these external and internal pressures that we experience the onset of neuroplastic symptoms. And so, many things can contribute to that. We need to look at trauma. We need to look at habits of personality. We need to look at repressed emotions, conditioned responses after an injury, societal oppression. Like all of these factors are really important as clinicians for us to assess because everyone can have different contributing factors, and it's important to figure out which are the most prevalent for any given client. But for me, those were some of the factors that were the intensity, the pressure, and also this piece around a conditioned response, which I'd love to talk a little bit more about as we get into things, but were really the primary drivers for me. So, as far as like, all the things that I tried, like many clients struggling with digestive stuff, I went down a path of restrictive diets, endless testing, allopathic medicine or Western medicine, and also alternative medicine. And so I tried every dietary intervention imaginable. Did food allergy testing with multiple elimination diets. I tried at least 15 different medications. I
Mhm.
did acupuncture, did neurofeedback, saw multiple gastroenterologists. I saw a naturopath for a couple of years. I worked with various supplements. I did psychedelic therapy, daily ice baths for 6 months, craniosacral work, hypnotherapy, even engaged in some psychotherapy approaches as well, including some somatic therapy, which was getting closer to what was needed, but was still missing some key pieces. And I also think it might be helpful to name that I had a dedicated yoga practice during this time. And so I was really well versed and practiced in several approaches to nervous system regulation. And I'd done a lot of work to also access my deeper emotions. And so I say that because those latter two things, especially the nervous system piece and then the emotional work, can be really crucial components of what leads to healing for folks navigating these types of mind body symptoms. But for me, none of these approaches, while I acknowledge maybe those in particular may have played an important role or laid a certain foundation for my later recovery, they didn't do anything, at least on their own, to shift the symptomology that I was dealing with. That didn't come until later. So all of that to say, well, there was great effort and a lot of compassion in many of those approaches that I tried. They didn't ultimately lead to lasting change. And this again is where my professional expertise and research really intersect with my personal lived experience. And that my master's thesis showed that and in my clinical practice as well, both really highlight the lack of significant lasting improvement with psychotherapy and other treatments in the absence of a neuroplastic pain framework. So without that underlying education, the brain body connection just isn't often addressed in the specific ways that need to happen to create healing. So if you've believe, for example, that as I did, that there's something irrevocably damaged going on with the nervous system. For example, a message that was really reinforced by medical providers that I saw, then you may be inadvertently reinforcing that fear symptom pathway. So we really have to learn how to deal with fear in a way that also is grounded in accurate understanding.
I really appreciate the piece that you shared around. I was well versed in all of these practices yoga, probably Eastern, Western, psychotherapy, probably already going down that road. I'm not sure exactly where you were, but down that road to become professional in psychotherapy. And still, those weren't necessarily the pieces that you need. Yes, they're all great and wonderful, but it is missing this understanding of the mind body connection with neuroplastic pain. So, can you give examples of maybe what you were told by practitioners that, oh, your digestive issues are probably caused by a dysregulated nervous system? Like, what actually were you hearing? I think it's helpful for people to resonate with that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it was vague. Uh, I was given descriptive based diagnoses, right? Diagnoses of exclusion. So irritable bowel syndrome or IBS, chronically mediated abdominal pain syndrome. These syndromes not actually identifying a true cause. They're just kind of describing the symptomology. And so there was an understanding I did find among, both allopathic and alternative medical providers that there was a stress connection, there was some element of that involved, but it was very oversimplistic in the way that it was kind of understood and explained to me. And it kind of was just like, well, just manage your stress was kind of the messaging that I got. And I was also told by more than one physician that this is lifelong. You're gonna just have to live with this for the rest of your life, and you're just gonna have to learn how to manage it. There's no cure. And I just couldn't accept that answer. I wholeheartedly could not accept that answer, which was a big part of what kept me persisting and searching for a solution. And I think part of that was the fact that I wasn't really given a structural diagnosis. My symptoms were functional, my tests were normal. And that's not to say that people who do have a physical or structural issue going on can't also benefit from a lot of what PRT can offer. But for me, that was really part of what kept me digging and searching for more answers and didn't take what I was told at face value.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. Even just the language of, yeah, their IBS or other things that I was given, because people can resonate with those pieces. So after this long journey of searching and not accepting that this was going to be your life, what was the turning point to then come to this mind body world and healing in a different way?
Yeah. So the true turning point for me was really this conceptual shift of an absolute validation of really what I had intuitively felt all along was that my symptoms were primarily driven by a conditioned response in the nervous system. And for years I had felt that this was the case, but the practitioners that I had seen just didn't really understand that concept as at least an application in my situation. And so that left me feeling really lost and pulled in a lot of different directions. And even though I kind of had this hunch, I really desperately needed the support and the guidance, and more than anything, the confidence to figure out how to decondition that response. So over the years, I'd experimented with doing things like relaxation exercises or even taking an SSRI for periods of time when the symptoms would come on or I'd have flares. So I was on the right track with those things, but it wasn't until this idea was really strongly validated and spelled out for me by the PRT approach, the pain reprocessing therapy approach, by a physician who was fluent in this framework, that the turning point came. So it really gave me this actionable plan that I needed and the confidence to know that I was finally heading in the right direction. And that realization was so powerful because it really became the foundation of my entire professional career. This need for specific, tailored direction really aligns with that critical finding from my research that of the importance of education that's tailored to neuroplastic symptoms. And that actually emerged as a critical predictor of recovery that was even more important in my research, at least, than therapeutic rapport alone, which we know as psychotherapists is incredibly important already.
So you're saying that the piece around education with PRT, with pain reprocessing therapy, because we place a lot of emphasis on helping you understand what's actually going on, that there is this mind and body connection and it's not just physically based. So you're saying that that education piece is a main factor in helping people recover.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that pain education piece, and also, yeah, and recovery stories, really helping people
Mhm.
to foster this confidence and this belief that this can work. And of course, we have to balance that with being outcome independent, right? But our clients need to understand that this is possible and have that belief that is
I
grounded in neuroscience and reality.
Yeah, exactly. I love that you found this work through a physician. That's not as common. And I think it's getting more common maybe, but that's great. There was actually a physician that suggested this to you.
Yeah, I mean that really is incredibly rare, I think still nowadays for folks to be guided in this direction,
Mm.
by a physician especially, and so I'm so grateful for that, and I think it also highlights a profound social injustice that's occurring in healthcare today, just how rare that is, one injustice of many. But even
Mm.
with that access that I had, it still took me 10 years to find appropriate treatment, to connect with a physician who could actually point me in the right direction and direct me to those resources. So that's another reason I feel so passionately about
Mm.
disseminating this information. And I so appreciate the work that you're doing and with this podcast to get the word out about neuroplastic symptoms and treatment because there are just so many people out there in desperate need of effective treatment and they're being profoundly failed by the medical system and in many cases by the mental health system and behavioral health system as
Mhm.
well. So yeah, I just really think that this education piece on a interpersonal level, whether it's with a client or whether it's on a more public level is crucial.
Yeah, definitely. We're growing. Our community is growing to sharing this information and getting it out there. But it's still
Yes.
small and, we're working hard at it. But it's a great community to be a part of. I mean, we're at the conference together and that feeling of just everyone working on this project together to this movement, right? This movement to change the name of pain and symptoms and how they're treated is cool to be a part of.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool to be a part of, and it's also so exciting to see, like at the conference, how much research is coming out and in progress that's really
Mhm.
validating these approaches. And my hope is that that'll really help to bolster this movement to inform more and more providers and patients.
Yeah. So you might have mentioned a little bit of this already, but when you finally came to this approach to PRT, what made it different for you? What was that click for you?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think that one of the crucial pieces that PRT lays out is that these physical symptoms that you're experiencing can be generated by neural pathways, physical neural pathways in the brain, rather than a structural issue in the body. And that paired with the understanding that these pathways can be changed over time. They are neuroplastic, so to speak, right? And then pairing that as well with an approach of here are the steps to get from A to
Mhm.
B. Having all of that kind of packaged together was really helpful for me. And I think one other piece that feels relevant to name here is the part of around, when you're experiencing unrelenting physical pain or discomfort, there are profound impacts on executive functioning. And so
Mm.
there were months, even though I had this hunch, like I alluded or talked about earlier about this being a conditioned response, there were months where I couldn't concentrate long enough to read even a
Mhm.
page of a book or sometimes even a paragraph. And so it was really important to be met with support, guidance, and like a structured uh, approach that could really help guide me towards exactly the things that I needed to be doing and also reinforce the belief and the understanding that like yes I am on the right track and help me to persist with that instead of before being met with that approach and this framework, I'm sure many of your listeners can relate. Like, there's this supplement, this diet, this
Yeah.
regulation tool here, and I found myself being pulled in so many different directions. So it really helped me hone in and focus on the most important pieces that would lead me to recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. There's a framework, right, if you
Yeah,
will, and we can kind of ebb and flow in that. Obviously, everyone is a little different in how they move and what's important to them, but it's different than many other psychotherapy models because we're pretty direct of like, "Hey, this is
yeah,
happening. Let's
yeah,
teach you what's going on, and
yeah.
here are some skills to help you get out of it, essentially, or learn how to really decrease or get rid of your symptoms."
Yeah, yeah, and I think to your point, that directness can provide a lot of safety for folks, particularly who are in a lot of distress, right? Because there's not this sense that you're spinning your wheels or as much as some other psychotherapeutic approaches can, I think sometimes feel for people who are really in acute distress or have chronic symptoms like this. So yeah, that piece feels important as well. And I think, to also connect PRT, there are many other approaches in psychotherapy can be really helpful, and it's very individual, when which might be more appropriate. But something that I really see as a thread that connects PRT to other somatic modalities and other psychotherapeutic modalities that I think can help practitioners tie all this together is this basis around safety, which again, I think that directness that PRT offers can really support with a lot of clients. It's built around this idea of like, okay, how do we actually pair this stimulus that is triggering these physiologic responses in your mind body system? How do we pair that with responses based in safety rather than fear or activation, which is usually what is driving those symptoms?
Yeah, I like that you're able to see how, I mean, it is a core component, right? When there is so much fear driving stress in the body, driving the nervous system stress, brain danger, right? Sending
Yeah.
signals to the body. So much of the core, especially in the beginning of this work and coming to it, is safety to help figure
Yes.
out how to create and provide that safety for the mind and for the body. So then we can help work with some maybe of more of the emotional distress or whatever comes from that, whatever the person needs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for naming that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would imagine that, again, the recovery stories and the education are a big piece of what can provide that safety for a lot of
Yeah.
people.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there any key moments or shifts that stood out to you along the way?
I mean, I think again, this encounter with this physician
Okay.
who told me, "Hey, this is actually 100% curable. And
Mhm.
here is a framework that completely validates and matches up with this intuition that you've had all along."
Yeah.
That was a critical moment for me and a shift, and it again gave me this hope and belief. Obviously, when we deal with these chronic symptoms, there can be a protective part of us that doesn't want to believe that something could work, and that was certainly alive for me in that moment because of, yeah, the great disappointment we've gone through oftentimes over and over of seeking and trying a new thing and it not panning out. But that moment really, it unlocked something in me. It gave me a hope that, okay, well, maybe there is a possibility. It's at least worth a try. And then it allowed me to really commit myself to working those principles
Yeah.
in a
Okay.
focused
I,
way.
that makes a lot of sense. Actually, it's somewhat similar to my journey. One of the key moments for me in the beginning was when I had actually a naturopath send me to a psychologist. He was like,
Oh,
"I think you need to go see this psychologist who essentially does PRT." It wasn't called PRT at the time, but and I mean, I didn't grasp it. I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll go do that." And it was PRT approach that I was like, "Okay." Um,
yeah.
so if we
Amazing.
can get the name out and get this information out to more physicians, more people that people and symptoms end up seeing, right? They're not going to first go to
Yes.
a psychologist or a therapist. They're
Right.
going to go to a physician. Of course you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's such an important piece of this work.
Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned a little bit earlier about medication, and I know you said you share or you have a opinion on, how medication fits into this journey. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I feel in sharing my own recovery story that it's important to mention that I started to experience improvement after starting an SNRI. And while I don't attribute all of my progress to that, we have really good evidence now that these medications, when used in conjunction with PRT and similar therapies, can really help to blunt or help reduce those signals from the amygdala that drive the sympathetic nervous system to respond in this way that's creating and sustaining physical symptoms. And so these medications can really help just bolster and support the development of those non-fear driven pathways and really help reinforce the PRT in that learning process. And that was something that was a part of my journey. And so I feel that it's important to be transparent about that, that these things can work synergistically. And it's not to say that every patient or every client needs to be on medication necessarily. I've seen many clients recover without the support of medication, but just naming that it is something that is potentially something that folks might want to look into depending on the advice of their providers that they're working with. And those specific international guidelines around the SNRIs come and the medication treatment specifically for functional abdominal problems come out of Doug Drossman's work in the Rome Foundation. So that's a great resource
Mm.
if folks are struggling with these symptoms and interested in learning a little bit more about the current recommendations. Yeah, so I think that just feels like an important piece to name and something I
Yeah.
don't hear talked about a lot. Um, and as far as like that kind of leads me to think about the way in which, some people we're all different, right? We all need a different combination of approaches. And in some cases, people can have resolution of their neuroplastic symptoms after reading a book, right? We've all heard those miraculous stories. Or I've worked with a client that had resolution of their symptoms after 2 sessions, and I just think it's really important to name that, at least for me and for a lot of other people navigating these symptoms, it can take a lot longer. It can be a slower process because these neural pathways can be really ingrained, and sometimes medication can be a support in that process as well. So yeah, that all just I think that feels about what I wanted to share on that point.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I agree. It's not talked about enough. I share on here a lot where I share about supports. I like to call them supports, right?
Mhm.
Medications, any treatments that feel supportive and helpful to help the
Mhm.
body feel safe, reduce that danger, reduce that anxiety and fear,
Mhm.
they can be great. It's different
Yeah.
when we're relying on them to fix everything. Then there's a
Absolutely.
lot of pressure. And I mean, we know that
Yes.
that doesn't work, right?
Yes, absolutely. I love that you're saying that because absolutely, I do not want people to take away from this conversation that you must be on medication to heal, and this is your answer. No, it's just another tool to help support those pathways of safety.
Exactly, and I get questions all the time, around people that are learning about this work, and they're like, "Oh, but I'm taking this medication, I'm doing this, like, do I keep doing them?" Like, "Yes, we don't actually wanna take them away, overnight, because that could actually be more harmful, more stressful to your
Mhm.
system, to your body, to whatever you're doing." So, yeah, I appreciate you saying that and that approach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so how has your relationship with your body or symptoms changed, and, yeah, how does it look like now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess thinking back to 10 years ago, and comparing that with today, 10 years ago, my life really revolved around searching for answers, trying to manage my symptoms the best that I could so that I could function to the degree I could function, which was really limited at times. So I would say, yeah, I mean, my whole consciousness and my whole experience of life was really, really colored by the physical discomfort that I was in.
Mm,
And yeah, it took up all of my brain space, so to speak.
mhm,
And now I would say this work is still a big part of my focus because I'm passionate about supporting clients in this way, but it's really not something that I have to actively think about anymore. There was a long period of time in those years in between where I was recovering, where I was still, really actively working the principles in a conscious way. And now I feel that I've gotten to this place where my mind body system has really internalized this deconditioning, so to speak, of these
mhm.
reactions that were occurring before. So, yeah, if I go through something incredibly stressful, I might feel a twinge or might have a symptom start to come on every once in a blue moon. But now I know how to respond to it and take care of myself. And it's not something that I consider to be chronic in any way. We all have sensations. Our bodies all speak to us and they provide valuable information for us about our needs, about our emotions, about how safe we're feeling in the world. And that still gets to be information that I can pay attention to, but it no longer has to show up in the form of pain or my body doesn't have to scream at me anymore because I've now built this relationship where I feel more tuned to what's happening internally. And that's something that took a really long time to develop. So I want to also just name that process in general, it needs to be gradual, right? It might be similar to how you're saying about going off the medication too quickly. It can be really overwhelming to start feeling our sensations, paying attention to our bodies all at once. So it definitely was a gradual process, but it's led me to a place where yeah, I have a much more direct connection to my internal landscape in a way that allows me to live more authentically and be free of chronic symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And now you professionally do this work, right? And
Now I
helping share it.
professionally do this work. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so what would you say to someone who's where you once were, maybe though 10 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I would say you can heal from this. You can get better, and I think obviously this has to be tailored individually but assuming someone has received a neuroplastic diagnosis, they've ruled out structural conditions, then I would be very very direct in saying like this is changeable, right? Might take time, but these neural pathways can be changed and you can be free of chronic pain. That messaging was incredibly important for me and also emerged as something that was really important in the research that I did for many other clients. So that's one thing that I would say. And again, even if there is a structural issue going on, there's still a very good chance that these same principles, these same therapies can offer a significant amount of relief. Because whenever we're experiencing chronic symptoms, our brain is primed to interpret that through a lens of threat. And through that process, it will begin to amplify often the experience of the symptom, whether it's increasing pain levels or increasing our emotional distress, usually both. And so that can be adding another layer of
Mm,
suffering and symptom activation or exacerbation on top of whatever that condition that may be structural would cause just on its own. And we can at least work with that layer of things. So I think just being really explicit about, there is research that these modalities can help. And this is not something that you necessarily will have to live with forever. And of course, we can't predict the future. We can't know exactly what will happen with every client's journey, and their involvement in the process is a key piece of how that unfolds as well, right? It's a partnership to do this work with a clinician. But yeah, there is a possibility there, a strong possibility of recovery.
yeah. That directness is actually something I've worked on, even on a professional level of being because it's helpful for people to hear that, right? And
Yeah.
it's true. I truly believe that. But I think in the beginning I was a little hesitant. I didn't want to overpromise something, and
Yeah.
be wrong about it necessarily as my own insecurities early on. But I found that, yeah, that directness is very important. People respond to it. They'll be like, okay, all right, let me engage in this and try.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do have to be careful, right? As a clinician, you need to know
Yeah,
that you've gone through the assessments and you can
exactly.
feel confident in what you're offering.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we have not talked about that you feel is important to share? There doesn't have to be. I just like to ask.
Yeah, there are two things that come to mind when it comes to gut health. People can
Mm,
have a lot of misconceptions, and we can be, again, led astray by a lot of different theories, right? When we're working with something like IBS or a functional abdominal condition. And so, one thing I just want to say is around food. We know foods we eat can impact health and even our nervous system, right? Through processes like increasing inflammation. So it's not to say that foods are unimportant necessarily, but for me and for so many patients out there struggling with gut issues, like IBS and similar conditions, it's not the root cause. And so,
Mm.
actually focusing too much on avoiding certain foods can actually reinforce this perception that those foods are harmful. And when it's actually an often unconscious association that is causing the symptoms, paradoxically, what's actually needed in those cases is a gradual reinterpretation of those foods as non dangerous. So it's not as simple as saying, like, just eat the cake or whatever. This is happening on a very, very
Yeah.
unconscious, implicit level, but it can require a really gentle and graded approach of reintroducing those foods in a genuinely non threatening way. And sometimes, that can come after doing some other foundational work and learning to resource safety in the body through other methods. And then the second thing I'll say is that once the gut in particular is dysregulated, and I'll preface this by saying this might be a little bit of speculation, but I would imagine that that dysregulation of peristalsis, or the rhythmic contraction of the intestine, could potentially lead to a host of downstream effects impacting the microbiome, for example. So there's still a lot that we're learning about that. But here's the thing: when people focus primarily on those downstream effects instead of the root cause, when that cause is based in a neurophysiologic process, they often get stuck. And so I found for myself and also other clients that I've worked with, making that shift of focus is really, really pivotal in their ability to unlock deeper levels of recovery. And that often whatever might or might not be happening downstream tends to resolve on its own when we focus on that root cause.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for saying both of those things. Very, very important. Well, both. But first, the food piece. I mean, if you listen to any of these podcast episodes, you know that is a hill that I will die on. Food is not
Yes.
the root cause, and we've got to rewire that
Yes, I so
association.
appreciate your messaging around that.
And then, yeah, definitely that there's a lot out there about the gut health and what affects negative gut health and all. There's just so much messaging, right? There's so much out there, but they're not discussing the root cause, what you just discussed. They're talking about the
Mhm.
downstream effects.
Right.
And so a lot of people think, well, that is the root cause, the downstream effects, those more functionally based
Mhm.
diagnoses or
Mhm.
functionally based reasons, right? But
Yeah.
no, there's a different layer there. So appreciate you sharing that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I so
Amazing.
appreciate you as well,
Yeah.
and all the work that
Oh,
you're doing around this.
this is a beautiful conversation. I know is going to be very, very helpful for people. Okay, so where can people find you? We'll obviously link everything below, but share with us where you're working, what you're doing.
Sure. So people can find me at bodyfulcounseling.com. If they're in I'm based in Colorado, offering somatic psychotherapy virtually across the state and doing some walk and talk sessions in Denver when it's not too cold. So they can find me there. Or if you're not in Colorado and you're interested in my coaching work, you can find me at bodyfulcoaching.com. People can also find me on Instagram. I just started a new page at Bodyful Counseling. So those are some, yeah, ways to reach out to me and find me in my work.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Claire. I really appreciate you having you on.
Thank you so much too, Grace.
All right, we will see you next week.